Sadly, I've seen all of those things happen all too often in my career, and it's happened to me. I think black staff still face this constant barrage of being undermined by their managers, including in front of students, and students are aware of that. You know, I've had students who are quite clear that they are frightened to be too associated with black staff, black students, because of that feeling that we're all illegitimate in the sector. And that just undermines people, so that it comes that when people are always feeling that their work's not good enough, being told directly and indirectly nothing about you is good enough, you're here on sufferance, then when more things happen, they're already depleted. And sometimes that leads to people literally being bullied out of their jobs.
So there have been kind of instances that I've been privy to, I've experienced myself in terms of harassment of black members of staff. I think often there isn't really a vehicle for them to channel those instances or those racialised instances, and often when they have kind of explained to senior members of staff and management about those experiences, they often haven't gone any further, and they've often been trivialised. So in a lot of cases, a lot of black members of staff, when they're kind of talking about these instances of racialisation, it kind of doesn't go anywhere, and it's that whole fear of creating further stigmatisation or marginalisation for themselves. So what we found is, because a lot of these arguments aren't taken any further and there's no gravitas towards kind of penalising racialised or racist behaviour, what we found is that a lot of BAME academics, they often keep these stories to themselves, often keep these instances to themselves, and the internal effect affects things like well-being, mental health, engagement professionally, and that's against the backdrop of kind of hyper-surveillance, kind of deficit model approaches, racial microaggressions and those types of things. The way I've tried to address it is to obviously be as professional as possible. So I've kind of spoken to members of staff about, you know, undermining, working as a collective, how they are actually fulfilling that kind of normative and deficit approach of, you know, black and ethnic minority academics. And I've kind of emphasised on the importance of not peddling that particular viewpoint from students and from members of staff. So that's how I've dealt with it, and how I've kind of spoken to students about it is just to make them aware that, you know, universities are a microcosm of society and they're diverse in their space, and by proxy of that, it's not unusual for you to have people that may teach you that are from different ethnic backgrounds. There's no such thing as one particular dominant ethnic background that should be in higher education. Obviously, historically, it has been, you know, middle-class white people, but it's important that we try and challenge students to dismantle that narrative, that visual narrative as well, and in doing that, kind of make them open to different canons of knowledge and different bodies of knowledge in terms of what they learn and how they learn, and that there's more than one way to learn. I think that's important. So it's a very different approach that you take with students than when you do with staff, because with students, I think in a lot of cases they're malleable. You can still change if they want to. You can change their way of thinking. But with staff that are, you know, slightly older than the students, they should know better. And a lot of their approaches are fixed, and sometimes they can be conscious, sometimes they can be unconscious. But in terms of those kind of racist instances and practices, they're still insidious, and they still happen in a way that goes under the radar, because I think what we all gravitate towards are the covert examples of racism, and in doing that, I think we're not so mindful of the more insidious kind of covert forms of racism. So we look for more the overt examples, and what we need to look for are the covert examples where our members of staff, faculty of colour, are being continuously undermined.
So every time I meet a student who tells me that they've experienced some kind of racial harassment or xenophobia, the first thing I tell them is, and I know a lot of people will say, you know, confront it. The first thing I say is your safety. Do you think at that point, at that given moment, do you feel safe? If you don't feel safe, then just walk out. But if you've got a critical mass around you, confront it, you know, just question that, what is happening. But the most important thing for us is report. So I think, you know, reporting to your police, reporting to your local councillor, reporting to the university, so that it's all logged. Because until and unless there's documentary evidence of that this is happening on such a large scale, I don't think we will, you know, be able to effectuate change in the same way we want to.